graph here is around 2,600 GPM, gallons per minute. Inside the building, this is basically what's happening. The water that comes from you, it comes at a high pressure. It comes at around 160 psi, pressure per square inch. Then we use the valves that we have, the pressure reduction valves. We have series of pressure reduction valves, basically, that takes this water, reduces the pressure, and then fills our tanks. And later on, we take those water that we fill our tanks, and we pump that water back into our system and serve the customers. So the issue that we had at the site was the high energy consumption. So we were actually consuming around 1.4 million kilowatts per year at this site, and we were paying around $130,000 a year in electricity. And as you know, the energy costs always are going up, and it was actually escalating by around 4% a year. So we were looking for different sustainable solutions that we can actually reduce this energy consumption. And then we came up actually with the idea. Currently, what's happening is that we have the high pressure water that comes in. Pressure reduction valves actually reduce that pressure, and the low pressure water that goes in. And we are actually losing the energy to heat when we reduce the pressure of the water. So we thought that why don't we replace one of these pressure reduction valves with a turbine? That way we can actually capture the water that comes in at a high pressure. We can reduce it to a lower pressure. And by using the kinetic energy, we can actually produce electricity that's actually green. That's not from a fossil. We actually partnered with one of our ISD, Internal Services Division, that's actually a part of Los Angeles County. And we put out a bid to see what kind of results we would get. We actually got an expert on the field. And apparently now they can make these turbines a lot smaller. What they call is a micro turbine. These turbines used to be huge turbines that they used to use at the dams. Now they can make them a lot smaller, that it can be actually installed in a pipe, and it can be used as a pressure reduction valve. At the same time, it can produce energy. And when they looked at our site, they came and they had an feasibility study. They proposed a 240 kilowatt Francis turbine, is what they call it. And they said that this turbine, based on the amount of water that we take from AVEK, would be able to produce up to 830,000 kilowatts per year, which is basically offsetting 60% of our energy cost at that site. And the project cost was going to be around $1.4 million, but we were able to actually find a grant from our Productivity and Investment Board in the Los Angeles County. They thought that this project was very unique because it is a sustainable project, so they actually gave us half of the project money as a grant. So we actually have a grant for this project. And when we calculated it, we also contacted Southern California Edison. They actually provide incentive for these type of green projects. They said that our incentive will be around $150,000. We will be able to get from Edison as well. So based on the calculation that I have run, this project will actually pay itself over in 11 years. And these turbines are built to last up to 25 years. There are different turbines that's actually installed that has lasted a month. And just to give you an idea, this will be our cumulative energy savings for 5 years. It's going to be around.
Why don't you go back a little bit and explain to the board and the staff that these facilities are custom built for each.
That's correct. And turbines are actually custom built. That's why we actually have a designer on board. What they do is that they actually do a flow analysis to see what kind of water is coming, what pressure it is coming. And they actually have to go to their manufacturer and specify exactly the type of turbine that we need. And they need to actually manage and design the orifices of the turbine to maximize the amount of energy they can produce. So that's the design portion of the job. And also, they also need the design so that the turbine operates properly. If it is below a certain pressure, then certain valves needs to open, certain valves needs to close, so that the turbine always gets the maximum amount of flow to produce the maximum amount of energy at any time. Which is actually equivalent to a gas emission that would come from 120 cars, but it's equal to 100 homes that would consume energy. It's equal to almost 65,000 gallons of gasoline that would be consumed otherwise. So there is definitely environmental benefits to this project as well. As I mentioned earlier, this is the first project in Los Angeles County that will actually use this technology.
How many valves do you have in our district?
In this building?
No, but I mean in the Antelope Valley.
We have a lot of valves, but one of the main things that we need to take a look at is that one end needs to be high pressure, the other end needs to be low pressure. make sense for the amount of money that we would spend and how much energy we would make out of it.
So it doesn't work on every location?
It will not. It will not. It will not make financial sense on every location, but there are other turnout buildings that we have, like M5 East building. We are actually looking into it. And also, we are looking into some other locations where we receive high pressure water, where we reduce the pressure to a lower pressure.
Did you have a consultant that helped you with this, or how did the project come about?
Well, initially, we heard about this in one of the water conferences. I believe it was in San Jose County, one of the counties that tried this technology, and they mentioned it. So we looked into it after that, and then we were able to partner with our ISD, Internal Services Division, and they were able to get an expert who came in and who evaluated. We actually evaluated two different sites. One of them was M5 East site, the other one was M7 site. Two turned out, turned out that this one was a better candidate for the money, basically, for the amount of money that we would spend. So they recommended installing this one.
This question to our staff, have we looked into this technology or other places?
Multiple times, yeah. The biggest issue, and this may be changing, but is you need to have significant load near where you're doing the energy recovery, which they do. They've got a bunch of pumps. This is a relatively new facility as well for them, so they finally have found kind of a match that makes this work. The other side of the coin is reliability. We have to have our transmission mains reliable and operating all the time. When we design something like this, it's got to be in such a way that if the turbine fails or has a problem, we can continue to run water. So both of those things the board has, I think, looked at a number of times over the years, and we haven't found this perfect match. But we understand that some of these projects are going to be a little more open to trading loads where you could actually put energy in the grid and actually get credit somewhere else. We think a couple of different districts have done that with solar, and may expand this later. So.
That is absolutely right. I mean, one of the biggest things is that if you want to get the maximum benefits, you want to consume that energy that you produce on site, and you basically get one-to-one replace for the amount of money that you will pay. If you were to consume the energy at other sites, there are different actual plans that Ferguson has. It is called REC, ESD, I believe. They have a certain program where you can produce in one location and then use that energy in different multiple locations. You
said you were starting off with one turbine.
One turbine.
Looking at the expanding or
At this site, one turbine is enough, basically, for the amount of flow. This turbine is what they call a Francis turbine, so it's a variable turbine. It can actually function between, if I'm not mistaken, between 2 CFS up to 10 CFS. And the average flow that we have at this site is around 8 CFS. It ranges between that, so it will be able to capture all the flow. We are basically asking an approval from the board to move forward with this project.
Yes, Mike.
Could I ask a couple of questions? This is inside a turnout building,
Inside the building.
and is it the agency's turnout?
It's the agency's owns the building. Agency has facilities in there, and then they've got some downstream facilities within that same building.
With the water system?
Yeah, and they're going to have to penetrate the roof. They're going to have to do socket the concrete. So then I think there'll be an agreement that'll be needed here.
So they would need to be able to access the agency's building in order to install and maintain your facility.
That's right. I believe we already have an access to maintain our box right now.
Yeah, well, they're for the site, right?
For the site.
Is the turbine, inside the building, there's a meter?
Yes,
Is this upstream or downstream of the meter?
it's downstream.
Downstream of the
So
meter?
it's their facility essentially, but the agency's building. So, my recommendation would be, if the board is amenable to this, that we move forward with an agreement that we can bring back to the board, the committee and the board. And then we'll need AECOM to follow the project, technically, because they designed the facility. So make sure we're good with that. So maybe the next step is to go to water projects with an agreement that the county drafts and hands to us.
question. Within this agreement, there be indemnification for in case something happens.
Yeah, that's the big worry is, these things are you know, electrical in nature, and if something were to happen, start a fire, and burn the building down. Good news is, from that standpoint, they are the only customer connected to this. We don't have any other customers that rely on this turnout, so they've got to take care of themselves when it comes to this project, to make sure we have reliable water in that area.
So we are in agreement.
We'll have an agreement, we have to put together an agreement to do that.
Okay, so that will be there, that you understand that that will be in the agreement.
Sure.
And there's no cost to the agency.
No, I think we would ask that they pay AECOM's costs as part of this, so yeah, I would say there would be no cost.
And are you prepared to do that?
And to change the subject a little bit, we talked about the subject about trying to do that at the West Feeder, and that's something we should be looking at again.
As Mike said, we kind of looked at a couple of different places in the agency system, and things got to kind of line up. I think the technology is improving. You know, they've actually made some headway in some of these micro turbines. But yeah, we have. I don't know if we've looked at the West Feeder lately. It is one of those places where we try to dissipate energy.
We do have a facility that burns a decent amount of electricity, maybe not every year, but in drop years. So it'd be something we could look at out at Water Bank.
If it's a decent, payback, I mean, there's areas that probably generate a lot of head going down the Wheel Valley. We have despair there. I don't think we go very much uphill once it gets to LA4, but just one of several projects we look at.
Yeah, one of the projects we looked at quite a few years ago was at the Rosamond water treatment plant. So we go into the
Yes, the pond. There's a load there, so that was enough of that.
I looked at it, that's quite a few years ago.
One more question, should move it off the subject, not off the subject, but I was driving, I went through facilities around A4, east of 10th Street West, with a solar field on this road. Is that one of yours?
K8 and 5th is our solar field.
And can you tell me what that does and what's that?
That's actually does exactly the same thing, but it's just a solar technology instead of water technology, basically. What we did is that this was also the first in Lake County. It was actually getting the water works that built that solar site.
Is that working out well for you? Or?
It's actually working out very well. It's producing around again 830, 800. I believe last year it produced 840,000 kilowatts.
The energy is used on site?
Yes, energy solution.
And again, I know, Dan, you know where at least I'm coming from, Lancaster and the Antelope Valley is working very hard towards net zero pollution in the world. As an agency, I think we need to reassess everything we've done in the past and look for anywhere on our facilities where we can solar, turbines, or any type of alternate energy that can help not only achieve that goal, but achieve the reason that is to sustain our planet. So these are exciting projects. I really enjoy our staff bringing us the same exciting projects. And I don't know what we need to get there, but pretty much a consensus of the board to certainly strive to do so.
Well, especially when there's money to be had, right? The biggest thing here is we're not going to pay for this, and if we can get money as well, and have consultants out there looking for money for us as well. And these conferences are coming up in 2015. I know a lot of them. I've looked at what the agendas are, and it's going to be a lot about power, energy, and things like that. We need to find out, was it published in 81? Is that what it was? A little money, we need to get some of that money.
Is this something we need a motion on, or does it just need to go to staff?
I think we should, I move to go ahead and accept the proposal.
The adjustments to the building, as you mentioned, is determined through the door.
We believe it will fit through the door. We just need to open a hatch at the roof for easy access for the future, where we can use it for
So you can put a hatch so you can use it in the future.
That's right. We believe that initially we can put it through the door, but if not, we might have to open the hatch and then put it through the hatch. We are at the 30% design, and we are still working on the design right now. But,
I don't know the other one.
right.
I would want to phrase the motion, we don't have an agreement.
No, I'm making a motion that we go ahead and go forward with the project, with the county, and wait for the agreement to come back. Because this thing has to be done, completed by this year, right?
That's right.
2015. That's when the grant money runs out.
Yes, ma'am.
Actually, that's consistent with what I was gonna suggest, because, I think what you wanna do is authorize the agreement to be prepared and brought back to board for consideration to approve the project at that time. That allows time to look at whether or not this is something that requires, CEQA compliance, and if so, you're supposed to complete that before you actually approve the project, so it gives us a chance to take a look.
And then actually, Ethiopia, there is actually a special exemption on CEQA for micro hydropower technologies that's under 5 megawatts.
It's money, they do have exceptions, just like the Tesla.
Just like
Sure. With the county here. There's been a lot of investigation beyond what we've done so far. I don't want to go out and hire a bunch of new consultants out there, so maybe we can get somebody from City of Lancaster who's, maybe you know, that's head of the project there, that can interface with our staff and what they're doing there. That way we can get a head start with the right people. I think would be helpful.
I agree, I don't think we need to go out hiring, so I think there's experts within our own area.
We're gonna have everybody sign up the staff saying they got a better deal.
Well, Jason at the city is
Maybe we do that.
Yeah.
Also got sent out to the package a breakdown of our CM budget scope and fee. So I'll hit the highlights of this and get into any questions. Bids, and I want to mention that the engineer's estimate is $2.2 million. But Mike asked for me to update that because during the bid period, we had several addendum to the contract documents. And one of those was that we added we added a bid line item for the contract to provide an emergency generator that would be able to run one of the wells in case there's a delay in Edison power, since we do want this water used next summer. So what we said in the bid documents is we added a bid item by addendum with a value of about $50,000, $60,000 that would have them providing an emergency generator and diesel fuel, and hook that up to the main electrical panel, be able to run one of the wells for up to 30 days in case Edison's power is delayed for any reason. So we have the Edison power scheduled to be set up for May, June, and July, reach the wells to come online in July, August, and September, but just in case we have that bid item added. So that really should have the engineer's estimate along with some other minor work that we did, more on the order of $2.28 million. The bids came in at 2.3, and then they were pretty tightly grouped at 2.4, 2.5, 2.7, 2.8. So we got the same bidders that are very active in the Antelope Valley with you, Nicholas Construction and Bowie. We also had Lyles that are interested in this job, and they came in second. So Nicholas, who just got awarded your contract for the East Side Water Bank, is the low bidder on this project. And the East Side Water Bank is the site work plus well equipping, and they're subcontracted for the well equipping who's best drilling. And this project is primarily well equipping, and they're subcontracted for the wells themselves. The well equipping is also best. So basically, it's the same team that was just successful on the East Side, it's just successful bidder on this project. So Nicholas has a valid contractor's license. They acknowledge the addendum, their paperwork in order, their math checked out. They had previous experience with AVEK on a number of projects, including the WSSP2 water bank, where they were a contractor on one or two of them, and a subcontractor on to Bowie on one of the others. So they've been very active on your projects, the water banking projects, and again, they're working on the east side of the best. So easy to confirm that they're a viable and qualified contractor. So basically, we want to recommend, consider recommending award for the equipping incarnation contract with Nicholas Construction. The most responsible bidder, responsible bidder for the amount shown here, $2,306,977. One, I can continue now, or wait for you to say that.
We'll go ahead with that first one. So I move on board order 6A to that .1 for the 2.306977.
One question.
Within the agency's boundaries, and you can take their bid and basically discount it by 5%. Discount it by 5% in terms of evaluating whether or not they're the low bid. That's what we're looking for. 5%, 3%, whatever it might be. I think some cities do it on the rationale that that awarding to a local contractor is going to produce tax revenue, which is offsetting. So there's justification, monetary justification for it. So you have to work your way through that thought process to figure out that the net result is that you're awarding to a low bidder even after you grant the preference. And I don't, since you don't get tax revenue, I don't know that you're in the same position the city would be in order to grant a local preference. The Palmdale Water District, are they a county water district or that's irrigation? County water district? One reason why they can do that is that the county water district doesn't have a competitive bidding requirement statute. And so they can do whatever they want because they're not bound by the statute. You don't have that luxury because you are. And your statute says you have to work for what's responsible for it. So in order to do it, we have to figure out a rationale for it and then do a calculation to figure out what the amount of the preference would be. And you have to show preferences and amount, placing the amount of the, on a net basis would make that contractor the most responsible bidder, even though he might be the next higher bidder. Then you worry about a job. So it's a tough.
And it's very difficult to control with the LLCs and affiliate offices and a few things. And it gets to be very difficult.
Because even if their office is located here, you know, where's the workforce coming from, and where are they getting the pipe and materials, and all that sort of thing. We have to take a look at it. I'm not saying no, but it's not quite as easy as it might sound. Just because someone else does it doesn't necessarily mean you're in a position to do it.
And what was the arsenic and chromium levels for these wells, and what's the expected production that you got from test pump? Is that something we've got quick? I know I'm putting you on the spot, Dave.
No, we haven't done it yet because we're doing it concurrently. So we've estimated that the wells will produce 1,000 to 1,100 GPM based on local hydrogeology and our expected depth of 500 to 550 feet. So what we have is we're going to do 3 zones of testing for water quality in the first well, which is why BR2 is going first, because it's in the middle of the well field. And if that water quality is good, we're going to continue without any further testing until it's pump tested in 2022. If that water quality has any concerns to us, then we can add zone testing to either or both of the other wells. You had like a 3-part question. Did we get it all?
I think, yeah. So basically, you're awarding the equipping before the wells have actually been completely drilled.
Yes, because we're going fast. Which you also complimented us on.
Yeah, I did.
As an engineer, it's working 80% on the east side project, but it's working 20% on this project. We're doing that with more junior staff to give you a better overall budget. So basically, it's $240,000 to $300 to provide construction management, resident engineering inspection on site, as well as office engineering for all the submittals and shop drawings and potential change order reviews, all the way through record drawings and startup. So that's what this budget is for, and I'm happy to answer any questions. If you take this budget and compare it to the construction cost, which is often done to see if it's in the 10 or 12% range, on this next slide, with a summary of what the 3 jobs have been so far. Since you've already awarded the first 2, that's the top and the bottom ones, 1 and 3. We now are able to fill in this missing number because we got the bids as of yesterday, so we know this is $2.3 million, and our fee is basically 10% of that number. If we include the materials tested for this job, it's just over $10,000, it's 10.4%. So when you add these all together, you can see that we have a $5.7 million estimate. We've got $5.7 million worth of construction. And between us and AECOM, there's $580,000 worth of construction management, inspection, office engineering, which actually averages a total of 9.7%. It's 10.2% when you add materials testing that exists on the pipeline and this project. So it's just trying, I wanted to bring you a summary of all three together since they've been awarded over a 2-year period. And with that, then the recommendation is to authorize an amendment to Kennedy Jenks for this amount. So decide.
I have, Dave, what about the, there was supposed to be a savings of 50,000 because they moved off early in something and they're gonna credit it.
Yeah, well, we have two sets of construction management going on. One is for well drilling and one is for the construction management on the site work and equipping. What we were expecting was that the well driller on the east side would be running into March, and the well drill on this project would start in March, and then we'd have an overlap of a month. So then the well drill on the east side was moving like gangbusters. So we put that extra month on this project. So the 188,000 approved, 186,000 approved, includes that month of March. Now, of course, they're going really slowly this month, that full figure. Because they've got one well stuck up and they're trying to recover a tool for the last couple of weeks. So they're dragging on, but we still think they'll be done and gone by the end of February, as opposed to running into March. So we have the geologists that are staffing the east side project on a daily basis during active work periods. We'll flip over and staff this project on active daily days during the following 5 months.
I have another question. Regarding, go back to the slide before. You know, one thing that just kind of puzzles me. Okay, so let's say it's $6 million contract. What if same material, same hours, and the contract was $8 million? Why do we pay 10% just because the price goes up?
Well, we talked about this some weeks ago where on smaller jobs it tends to be 10 to 12%, but on larger jobs it tends to be 8 to 10%. And so if it's a super large job, I guess you could squeeze out where it only reaches 7%. But interestingly enough, you know, this job has 36 drawings, the east side job has 96 drawings. So in the business, it generally ends up that you have about 1.5 shop drawings per drawing and about 1 hour 5 per drawing, and it takes them 4 hours each. So it tends to flow in about a consistent manner. So when you inquire across consultants, you kind of have these sets of numbers. So, you know, we run the numbers, we run the hours, and I have the detailed hours. And what we're able to do on this job is actually reduce it by $20,000 to $30,000 to do an overlap. They will actually run 2 projects at the same time. We would have been a tad higher if it was separate at the time.
Mike, do you review these things?
Added another 210 days or another 230 days or another. So we basically extended that contract, but we've never changed the rates. As I mentioned before, we have 40-year-old rates for payback.
This may be correct or it may not, but the fundamental thing that we're doing, we're not getting any comparative prices. We're not letting an outside party look at it. We're taking what's presented. And so by nature, we do an engineer's estimate for the construction of the projects. And I think what you brought up earlier, the percentage really have very little to do with what the effort is put in. And we need to look at the hours, and that's incorrect, the time, if that's incorrect. And what I have never seen in all the years I've been on this board, I don't think anybody from staff has ever questioned, and maybe they have to be wrong, maybe they have, but I do not remember anybody ever questioning or saying that's not correct. If you buy a home, you negotiate. If you buy a car, you negotiate. You get a credit card, but if we get the best deal, and I just don't know if we're not lacking on that in a more income. And I'm not sure staff is negotiating these engineering costs, and maybe it shouldn't be staff. I think it should be the board and the committee, but I think we're lacking on that. We don't have any separation. We have a separation between the contractor. We have our engineer that we're hiring to do the bids, but everything that we're doing with the contractor, we're not doing with our engineer.
The
staff this, I mean, a lot of the questions that we have for Kenny Jenks on a staff level, we try to iron them out before they go to the committee. And then the committee has oftentimes questions. So it may appear by the time it gets to the board that there's no issues, but a lot of the, staff level work has already been done.
Well, I hope that it definitely appears that way. As long as I've been on, I do not remember that there's ever been staff bringing up any announcement. The board's brought it up, the committee's brought it up through the years, and there's been things we've looked at, and there's been changes. I know that. I know that on the finance years ago, that's been done. But it's very hard for the committee. Most of us are not technical in nature, so it's got to be pretty apparent. But we'll question the thing, but I just don't ever remember staff.
Real easy, it's actually putting it into the app or how to write the app and those type of things. And like I say, the college has a graphics program, and I know Palmville hires some interns, and I know they now have their water conservation and public information officer on staff, so they may have the insight. So that's why there's not a budget, because it's more of, again, we're in the conceptual state on whether we want to go forward with the process until we get a budget. So again, that's just more comments.
That's amazing. They're doing things with apps today, it's just amazing. I've seen people scanning food now, they tell them how many calories that food is.
There's actually apps out right now, you take a picture of the leaf. There's a lot of them out there. And then the third one, which is actually part of the board order, which was the status, is we jumped into the home show very late last year. It was our board, and we took it to the state water contractors, and they agreed to participate in it. We need to, home shows only is March, so we don't want to start as late as we did last year. So we have a board order on here to do the home show, and hope that the state water contractors, all of them are going to go back and say we're going to do it, which I believe they will. They all loved it last year, and so I'm sure we'll do it as the state water contractors.
But there's another board order on that.
But there's a board order on that one there.
Also move, and there's a blank for a dollar amount.
Yeah, I think it's $200 or $250. Of course, that wouldn't be our full amount, but again, I don't know how we are on supplies or handouts.
Aguadulce area who wanted to get water service to their property. In order to do that, the agency's treatment plant needed to be expanded to provide water service to them, and some transmission facilities needed to be constructed to deliver the treated water to them. Their well water supply was insufficient to supply their needs, and so they wanted to have access to agency water. And so there were a bunch of several property owners in the area who wanted to form a community facilities district and sell bonds to finance the expansion of the agency's water treatment plant by 2 million gallons per day, and also to build transmission facilities to deliver the water to their properties. So they approached the agency. Some of them, frankly, were somewhat unsophisticated folks, smart but not experienced, who were trying to become developers of their property. They thought they had great value in that. At the time they thought about doing it, there was a kind of a housing boom. There was great demand. Frankly, by the time it got formed, there were indications that that might be weakening a little bit. But nonetheless, they pressed the board to proceed to form the CFD, and the board did agree to form the CFD. And the agency sold bonds in 2 series to finance the expansion of the treatment plant and also construction of some of the transmission facilities. The way Community Facilities District works is there's it's called a rate and method of apportionment of the taxes that's approved as part of the bond covenant. That sets the maximum amount of tax that can be levied on the property in order to take that service on the bonds. And so that bond covenant was there. Bondholders, when they purchased their bonds, they relied upon that in purchasing the bonds and all of the commitments that went with it, including, if necessary, foreclosure on the property in order to pay the assessments that were being levied on the property to pay debt service on the bonds. So there was an institutional purchaser of the bonds, they put it in some kind of a fund, retirement fund, I forget who bought it. And the agency began levying taxes to pay debt service on the bonds. Well, wouldn't you know, as soon as that happened, the housing market fell through. A bunch of the property owners, the developers who got great plans, saw that they didn't have a market for their property anymore. The next thing you knew, they weren't paying their taxes. And when they stopped paying taxes, then the agency was put in a position of having to foreclose on the property in order to raise the money necessary to pay debt service on the bonds, in order to keep faith with the bondholders who bought the bonds. There was a concern that the market was so bad that there might not even be purchasers for the bonds. And so it was turning upside down and in a hurry. And there were a lot of defaults in the payment of the assessments, and the agency was in danger, and in fact, was at the point of defaulting on the bonds as well. At that point, some of the facilities had been built. There were some houses that had been constructed that were receiving taxes and paying their taxes. In many cases, even some of those houses, there were foreclosures, but at least there was improved property. But there was a lot of unimproved property that had not been developed, even at that point, that was in default. At that point, it was a CFD that was in distress, and there was a firm that kind of tries to deal with these situations, come in and resurrect or save failing CFDs. The firm that kind of swooped in to save this one was called Tower Investments. And it turned out to be a very complicated and sometimes contentious process, but ultimately what they did is Tower purchased all of the undeveloped property at a discount from those property owners. A lot of them lost money, but they didn't lose everything, and they sold it at a discount to Tower. Tower simultaneously purchased from the bondholder, the institutional investor, these bonds that were in danger of being in default, and they bought those at a discount as well. So what Tower succeeded in doing was buying all of the property that was in distress, that was undeveloped, and all of the bonds that went with the property. And then, so Tower then was in control. They owned the property and they owned the bonds. But they wanted to be able to sell the property, and so the plan that was worked out, and it was kind of a meticulous negotiating process, was there was a kind of an engineering and mathematical calculation that was done to determine the number of units that could be served from that 2 million gallons per day of additional capacity in the treatment system. That translated into a number of residential units that could be served, and those residential units were then allocated to various zones within the community facilities district. So even though the property was undeveloped, it was just sort of projected what the development would be in the zone, and they sort of divided up the number of allocated units and assigned them to property within each of those zones. Units were allocated to zones, but also bonds were allocated to zones in proportion to the number of units. And so the debt service went with each zone in proportion to the number of units in those zones. And they did that so that they would be in a position to sell that property to other people who might be interested in buying them. And sure enough, they, through effort, they ultimately found, I don't remember a name, Casoulis? Casoulis name coming up? Well, Casoulis is one of the principals in a couple of entities that were formed to purchase the property and also to purchase the bonds that went with it. And so you still have a situation where for this undeveloped property, the property continues to be owned by a developer, and the bonds that go with the property also are owned by the developer, except now instead of just Tower, there's actually 3 parties involved. One of them is called B&C Land and Water Company, and they own some of the property and some of the bonds. The second one is Brandenburg Agrodulce LLC, and they own some of the property and some of the bonds. And then the third one is called Woodridge LLC. And so together they all own all of the property that Tower owned, and together they own all of the bonds that Tower owned. And there are units and bonds assigned to various zones within all of that property. Just as a little bit more background, because the this will be coming up later on, and this will help explain what's going on later on when this happens. Each year for a number of years, since the same parties owned both the bonds and the property, they thought that it did not make sense to have the agency levy taxes on their property, just so that the agency could raise the money necessary to pay them debt service on the bonds. It would just be circular. And so there were moratorium agreements that have been executed every year since then as to those properties, whereby they say, never mind, don't levy the tax, and we'll forego the payment of debt service, and the principal amount will just be deemed reduced by an equal amount. And so that continues to occur, and slowly over a period of time, the principal amount of the bonds has been whittled down, and the only thing that remains for this undeveloped property is what you see on Exhibit B1 of the agreement that's in the packet. And so if you take a look at that, you'll see that bonds were actually sold in two series, one in 1990 and another in 1991. And some of the bonds were allocated to each of the three zones that are involved. One's called Zone 1, another one's called Zone 7A, another one's called Zone 7B. And the bonds are allocated to those zones and to those property owners in the proportions shown on that graph. What's happening now is the folks that own the property are finally in a position where they think they can begin to sell the property and develop it. And there were projections that were made as to the number of units that would be assigned to each of those zones. And what they've agreed among themselves, and it's a totally enclosed unit because it doesn't affect anyone other than them. What they've determined among themselves is that those units need to be reallocated to this zone. In other words, some of the units assigned to one zone need to be reallocated to a different zone instead. So all this agreement does is it reallocates all of the units that are assigned to all three zones. It reallocates them among those zones, and there's some adjustments occurring there. And so what this agreement will do is reallocate those units among those three zones, and also reallocate the bonds that go with those units in those three zones in the same proportion. And so what you have is an agreement that would do that. It's at their request, is to allow them to proceed with the development in a way that they think is more realistic at this point. There are no units being sacrificed, there are no bonds being sacrificed, it's just reallocation of the whole along the period of time. It happened, we don't think this would happen, but what if it did happen, that the maximum tax rate that can be applied under the bond covenant does not, when applied to the property in the zone, what if it doesn't raise enough money to pay the debt service on the bonds? And what they've agreed that in the unlikely event that that were to happen, what they would do is they would surrender bonds in the amount necessary so that the two would match. That's basically what the agreement provides. So it's a complicated agreement. It's not one I prepared. Frankly, it's not one I could have prepared. It's prepared by Dick Anderson in our office. But I talked to him, and that's the concept that's involved, and that's what this agreement is.
So that's what at least the majority of it was involved.
And then, they understand that, if push came to shove, you still have the taxing authority set forth, and the obligation, frankly, set forth in the covenant to tax the property in the way that was originally envisioned. And that everything, the way that they would like it to be done is all done by agreement. But if that agreement didn't work, then you'd be back to doing what you were originally allowed to do. But in order to prevent that from happening, they have agreed that in the unlikely event that the maximum tax that you're allowed to impose produces insufficient revenue to pay the debt service on the bonds that go with that property, then they'll just surrender bonds in the amount necessary so you don't have to, so that it equals your maximum tax authority.
Been 20 years, hasn't it? Well, 20 years since they
have already signed this agreement in anticipation that you will be able to. They're a little bit, they got ahead of themselves a little bit on that, but I think they're confident that since it's okay with them, it'll be okay with you too. It only affects them. There are hold harmless provisions in here. There are also provisions that require them, if they were to sell the property or to sell the bonds, to provide notice to the purchaser as to what the arrangement is. And in the meantime, what you still have is the original lien that was filed on all of this property that survive a sale, which puts purchasers on notice that you have the authority to tax the property as necessary to pay that service on the property. So that's a lien that's of record, regardless of what this agreement says. Property owners, even if they weren't told what they're supposed to be told, they would nonetheless be on record notice that their property is subject to taxation in order to take that service.
Well, I have a question. Who paid for you to put this together?
They made a deposit
So they'll be responsible
for covering the deposit.
for cover the cost.
Yeah, I have to admit that the deposit they made is falling a little bit short, but it's not too much. But what that means is that's charged as a cost of administration, which is charged to the property owners in the form of their tax. So they end up paying it anyway.
Oh, I see. Okay.
It's also true that those individual homeowners pick up a little bit of that, and they're not part of this deal. So that's an inequity that's so small that it's hardly worth trying to figure out.
Was part of the shifting due to the county's town and country plan that houses were not allowed to build or not build? Or?
I don't know. I don't know what's behind their determination that the units need to be on it. So in zone one, the total amount of debt, the principal amount of the bonds that go with zone one is $231,000. That's not very much. In zone 7A, it's also pretty small. It's $460,000. 7B is larger, but it's about $2.9 million. It's still relatively small compared to what the original bond issue was. So it's getting whittled down, and I think it's just going to become a non-issue soon. But the 1990 Series A bonds, some of them are about to expire. And I'd have to look at a different document to see what the schedule is for that to happen. But I think you're getting near the end. So in 1990, those bonds were sold at probably 30-year bonds. So it's probably 24 years.
We jump right into water supply. As you know, the state water project allocation as of December 1st was 10%, and it's has remained 10%. I'll show you another couple of charts. I really think this was a very conservative allocation. I think that really at the end of on the end of January, probably all of this water will be south of the delta, so it's a very conservative allocation. Oroville is at 62% of historical average, which doesn't sound good, but it's way better than where we were. We were in the 40s the last time I reported. San Luis is at 64% of average. So if we look at this is the 8-station index, which kind of indicates what's going on in northern Sierra. You can see the black line there. Right now we're at 22.8. So you can compare that with last year. We were in this position. Well, it was even April. I mean, it was April before we went above that level. So we're a little over average. That blue shaded area is average. So we're at 106% of average in Northern California. So those storms were warm, but they did help. Not gonna turn those down, but.
Can you go back for a second?
Sure.
Dan, it's interesting. I mean, what you're saying. I mean, I like it. I mean, it's positive, but look at that chart. If you compare it to other things, it's not really that good. I mean, am I missing something?
No, it's you'll notice that each one of those years, they used to joke about you get all your weather in about 2 weeks, and you'll see that most of those years, when those lines go up, those are big storms they get in, and so you need 3 or 4 or 5 good storms, and so really, we're better than we were last year, but we're not out of the woods. I mean, it's definitely just touching normal at this point.
Okay, I'm confused now. So you're saying like on the top where it says 2012, 13. So is that the whole year why that's up there, or is that just? I'm looking at October 1st.
So right here, this is this year. So we're at 22 points because you can see that it's Mount Shasta, Shasta Dam, Mineral, Quincy. These stations up here, the Feather River Basin is right up in here, and so Oroville is where we capture that water. Where the State Water Project really develops water is water that they can capture in Oroville and water that they can catch in the Delta when there's wet periods. So, you have actually your water right is for both of those places. So that's why they look at that Northern California number, is just to give you an indication of what's going on. So I'll show you another, the San Luis chart. This is really an interesting, every year is a little different, and you kind of have to analyze this, but when they do that initial allocation on December 1st, they look at water that's in storage, water that's in San Luis, water that's in Oroville, what the storage levels are, and a conservative hydrology. And so, both San Luis and Oroville very low, and they plugged in a conservative hydrology with all the fish restrictions and everything like that, and that's where they came up with the 10%. And my theory is they were way conservative. But so that's what that chart shows. Again, they have a chart just like this for the Southern Sierra. That shows this. There's I think it's 7 or 9 stations that cover this area down here. They have another chart that shows this area. The reason I show you this one is just because what we're capturing in Oroville. This shows, reservoir conditions. So again, Oroville's at 62%. The red line is the historical average. So this is the wet water right there, how much water we actually have. San Luis is at 64%. So you can see Southern Sierra, it's pretty doggone low. This last storm we got hit Southern California, and I think these, helped these numbers, but man, it's still very, very dry. Too much. Once it gets up a little bit, then you can regulate the delta, and it helps your water supply, or at least your allocation on the state water company. This is probably the bright spot. This one little bright spot is, see, this is DWR's share. And see, we're almost up to 600,000. The allocation at 10% to contractors, that's 400,000. So even if you figure in carryover, like I said, they usually figure, okay, what's in storage and then kind of a conservative hydrology. They basically said, what's in storage and nothing from now on. So what they allocated, the 10%, is already in San Luis. So it's safely south of the Delta. So it just quit raining altogether. They're not going to back off 10%. So they really probably, if they factored in a conservative hydrology, they really should be at 15% now. And the med experts think it's going to go to 30 or 40%. Just if you have an even Steven kind of hydrology, it's going to get better. He's an optimist. So our water supply outlook, just looking at our AVEK water supplies for this year. What I did is I put together, okay, a 10% table A, the carryover we have from this last year in 2015. The Yuba water, remember, we get about 600 acre feet from the Yuba agreement. So that adds up to about 15,000 acre feet from the state water project. Our estimated groundwater supply, this is both WSSP2 and East Side. It's about 18,000. These are rough numbers, but additional groundwater supplies. This is the 2 pump-ins that the possible one. One we did this last year. We had an option to do another one, but those are possible supplies. The board decides we want to turn those on, we can, but I just kind of wanted to throw this in. So if we look at our water supply for 2015 at 10%, we got about 40,900. That's kind of roughly the number we got. Approximate supply at 15%, we're looking at 47,900. So actually, I have to congratulate the board because the investments you've made in the facilities and so forth is what's making that happen, and this happen. So it gets you in much better shape. So that's kind of where we're at, 10% and 15%. If we look at the demand for this year, last year, the 2014 demands were 34,000 acre feet per about. We estimate the demands for this year at 35. That's kind of our staff estimate. We think, it's probably, looking at the long-term average, what our customers are doing, it's likely to be about 35%, or excuse me, for 35,000. We budgeted, we built our budget last year on 45,000 acre feet. What the orders are, which is kind of, just what we asked the customers for, and they probably give us a conservative estimate, is 47,000. So that kind of gives you a feel for what our supplies look like at the 10% allocation and what our demands. I expect, you know, our real final number is probably going to be somewhere between that 35,000 and, you know, and 45, you know, somewhere in that area. Kind of depends on how our customers, how much they want to pump their own wells. So that's kind of what we're looking like for this year as far as water supply. Unless I give you an opportunity, if you have any questions, I'll go on operations.
Ken, did you have a recommendation to bank some water in the Antelope Valley this year?
I think it, you know, you are well positioned this year to meet your demands, to meet your budget, even at the 10%. I think you're kind of at the point at 10% to where you've got your bases covered. If the allocation goes up to 15%, there's a lot of opportunities for exchanges with other agencies or recharge. So I think if the allocation goes up a little bit, I think you have some real opportunities, depending on, you know, what the board would like to do. There's an operations meeting next week that I'm going to go to in Sacramento, and so at the next board meeting we may hopefully have an update. The department, again, since they kind of overshot last year, you know, they allocated a little quick last year, they're being extra conservative this year. My thinking is they're going to wait at 10% until they get some reading from the State Water Resources Control Board on the Delta Gulf. If they get a little relaxation, then they could probably go to 15%. So I think in the next couple of weeks, we'll get a little definition. So I think AVEK right now is at the tipping point where we get a little more water, or we get more aggressive about pumping some of those pump ins. You have options. You can recharge, you can exchange, and I think you're going to be able to cover your existing demand.
How much did we set aside in the budget?
Actually, we didn't budget any for. I was mistaken. I talked to you earlier. We didn't have any budgeted for recharge. I think we were kind of trying to cut it lean and mean, and we just had 45,000, which is probably a little on the high side.
Well, if we do end up banking some, would we want to encourage our customers to also invest in some bank?
Definitely. I think that, I think LA County Waterworks has been using their banked water this past year, and I think they'd probably be interested in doing some recharge. We haven't talked in detail with customers yet, but just because we're sitting at 10%, so once we get to 15, 20, 30%, we'll definitely get, because we have relationships and we have programs that we can.
Let's ask Mr. Rod and Jake, do you think the county would be interested in banking water again?
Yeah, I think Dan makes a very good point. If we get around 35, 40%, yes.
Operations, Quartz Hill is at 10 MGD. We're doing a lot of maintenance right now. So we have Rosamond, the east side, and the PWB connection are off. Our water bank extractions are 13 MGD. And that's just WSSP2 now. Since we had a contract for the 96th Street that went through the end of the year, we just thought we'd stop on that and then see how the year develops and look towards appetite for continuing on that water. We have a relationship with them. We can start that back up again. They're open, I think, to doing that. We just haven't pulled the trigger on it. Or kind of had a sense of what our supplies look like. We do have an outage on the north feeder. We've contacted all the customers. It's just it's just February 2nd through the 5th, and I think it's annual maintenance. No surprises or any other operational issues, John? Water banking, again, our extractions right now are 13 MGD. 2.5 are going to Mojave, and 10.5 are going to 80th Cambridge. Water quality, we did get THM results, and I think I reported on those that they're all below our goal of 64. THMs are trending downward because of cooler weather and so forth. Vincent tank is probably our highest, is the one we're gonna be watching and managing, because one of the things that affects THMs is retention time, so we're gonna be actively working on reducing that retention time. We're gonna keep an eye on the pH levels in the aqueduct, because we've had a couple of episodes with pH giving us a little trouble on the treatment. But we do have CO2 systems that kind of address that, which has been a good investment, I think. I don't know, Mike or John, you have any?
Yeah, we're moving forward with that. Should have that online before summer, so that'll really help us out, especially if we have similar water quality as we did last year, where there's nothing moving in the aqueduct and all it's doing is growing algae. So we'll be ready for that.
State Water Project, and I've reported on this rebuild. They've been working on this for 6 months now. I kind of took a personal interest in this because the State Water Project kind of had a business culture where they would bill you high and then they'd wait 2 years and then send you your money back. And there's two problems with that, at least two problems with that. One is that they hold on to your money for 2 years and then they don't manage to a budget. They just say, well, we'll do the right thing and we'll see what it costs and then we'll give you a credit when it comes back. And obviously they never underbill us, they always seem to overbill us. So we've really, this is one thing State Water Contractors Organization and myself at Audit Finance have really pushed the department to get more aggressive on developing a budget and managing through the budget. And I think we've been successful in changing the direction of the ship, and AVEK is actually going to get about $3 million back. They sent us a bill on July 1st. We were beating on them for the last 6 months, and they came out with a rebuild, and they're crediting us another $3 million. So, and I think even more important than that, we've changed the business culture, and I have to give the Deputy Director, Carl Ferguson, some kudos for this, because he actually took an agency that was very bureaucratic and very stuck in its ways and actually said, we need to operate this more like a business. So I think it's a real success story, and it was helpful for us to get it, at least we're holding on to the $3 million instead of Department of Water Resources. We are continuing on this contract amendment negotiations and this is to, how to pay for the twin tunnels, how we're going to participate, if we're going to participate, what our options are. Maybe we want to partially participate, maybe we don't want to participate at all, and also give us more flexibility to do what we need to do as far as our table so we can negotiate transfers and exchanges between contractors. It's been very difficult up to this point.
I heard something that the wind tunnels don't work, I just don't want the bullet train.
Yeah. That's an option.